We are living in an age wherein technology of internet is ruling our day-to-day activities. We are using this technology for communicating. We are using this technology for entertainment purpose. We are using this technology for all kind of commercial transactions. The said technology has been so well received by the communities across the globe that this has become the new norm. The dark side of this wonderful scenario is that people have started using this technology for committing illegal activities, because of which there is always a requirement for some kind of law for protection against its misuse. I, Dr. Ramandeep Singh, Assistant Professor, Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, National Law University, would be dealing with certain important aspects pertaining to the technology of internet. Before I start, let me give you a brief idea of what we would be covering in this lecture episode. We would be starting with a brief introduction of cyberspace, how it has grown, its dimensions. After that, we would be coming down to the evolution of cyber regulation in the world in general and in India in particular. Here we will be talking about the whole structure of the regulation we have in our country. After this, we would be shifting our focus to initial challenges. When the regulation was framed, when the regulation was designed, what were the initial challenges we faced? Then we would be shifting our focus to the current challenges which we experienced with the passage of time. And then we would be coming down to what is the requirement of today. So let's start with the brief introduction of cyberspace. Friends, cyberspace is a space which has been created by the technology of internet. Internet has grown so much, it has expanded so much that almost every activity around us has become dependent on this technique. You name any activity, you will find that it has become totally dependent on cyberspace. And it won't be wrong if I say that the critical infrastructures of the country are now ruled by the technology of internet. And it has brought so many changes around us that it won't be wrong if we call it the mother of all revolutions. Often it is compared with the most popular revolutions of historical times, like invention of printing press, like invention of a sailor's meter. What role was played by the invention of printing press and sailor's meter during medieval time, the same role is today being played by the internet. It has opened up new frontiers, it has opened up new avenues for sharing, dissemination of information, dissemination of knowledge. It has killed distance. Every nook and corner of the world is just one click away. This is the magic of this cyberspace. So one thing which we cannot ignore is that almost every activity around us is floating in cyberspace. If we talk about technology of internet, it started way back in 1969 in USA. It was not internet at that point of time when it started. It was ARPANET. It was a joint effort of US Department of Defense with few academic universities. It was a humble beginning. They just started with 3 nodes, and then with the passage of time, with the new inventions, this network started expanding. Eventually it grew, it expanded, particularly the biggest change in this regard came up in the year 1989 when World Wide Web was invented, which is considered to be the biggest game changer. The internet, the way we have used internet, the way we have experienced internet, it started with invention of World Wide Web. Browsers came into use. This network, this technology became user-friendly. It got global access. So the ARPANET, with the invention of World Wide Web, became internet. So this was the manner in which ARPANET became internet. Now we would be shifting our focus towards the initial challenges which came up with the invention of World Wide Web, with which internet became reality. And friends, one important development which came up here was that this technology, this medium, it shifted towards commercial use. And we have always seen that wherever there is commerce, there are disputes. So the thing was that there was a requirement for some kind of regulation in this regard. So now we would be shifting our focus towards the regulation of cyberspace, how it came into being, how the regulation was designed, how regulation was framed. Now we would be talking about that. In this regard, let me tell you that the way internet shifted the focus towards commercialization, there were lots of issues, there were lots of concerns, and there was a requirement for law in this regard. 1989, World Wide Web was invented, and because of this, during mid-90s, the reality was, the picture was that the whole world was shifting towards online transactions. The whole world was shifting towards electronic transactions, and the concern of that point of time was that we were not having adequate rules, adequate laws in this regard. Because of which we were not in a position to give legal sanctity to the ongoing electronic transactions which had become a reality because of internet. So there was a requirement for providing legal sanctity to online transactions. In this regard, everyone was looking towards UN in this regard, and here very important role was played by the specialized agency of UN, CITRAL, UN Commission for International Trade Law. This specialized agency of UN came up with a model law on e-commerce, and the whole intention was that countries will come up with a regulation in the light of the UN CITRAL model law on e-commerce. When this was framed, when this model law on e-commerce was framed, it was appreciated by the General Assembly, passing a resolution. This model law on e-commerce was adopted, and circular was sent to all member countries by the UN General Assembly. That circular mentioned that if you have any rule, if you have any regulation, if you have any law pertaining to cyberspace, then you reframe it in the light of UN CITRAL model on e-commerce. And if you don't have any such law, then you come up with a new rule, new law, new legislation in this regard. Being a founder member country of UN, India also received this circular, and now the onus was on our government to come up with a law in this regard. In the light of UN CITRAL model on e-commerce, IT bill was prepared. Getting passed in both the houses, receiving the assent of the President. The IT bill, the Information Technology Bill, became the Information Technology Act 2000. So this way, the IT Act 2000 was framed in our country. This was a reality This was the regulation which was framed in India. In the same manner, there were many other countries which, in the light of UN settled model on e-commerce, they came up with their own regulation. Now, we would be talking about the structure of the IT Act, which was designed, which was framed in the year 2000. In this regard, let me tell you, initially it had two main objectives. First was to promote e-commerce in the country. It was but natural. This law was framed on UN settled model on e-commerce. So one objective had to be, it was but obvious, it had to be promotion of e-commerce in the country. And second objective was to promote e-governance in the country. In total, there were 94 sections divided in 30 chapters, and with these two objectives: first, to promote e-commerce in the country, and second was to promote e-governance in the country. If we talk about e-commerce in the country, the promotion of e-commerce in the country, in this regard, the biggest concern was providing legal sanctity to online transactions, providing legal sanctity to electronic transactions, wherein the biggest concerns were to ensure authenticity of sender, to ensure message integrity, to ensure non-repudiation. These were the biggest concerns. In other words, these were the three fundamental requirements for providing legal sanctity to online transactions. In order to meet these three fundamental requirements, the arrangement which was made under the IT Act was that we came up with a concept of digital signature. Digital signature based on cryptography was used to provide legal sanctity to the online transactions, which were the part and parcel of the whole process of e-commerce. We have provisions under the IT Act that provide for the concept of digital signature. Who will issue digital signature? How it would be issued? How it would be regulated? All provisions, related guidelines are mentioned under the IT Act. The second objective of the IT Act was to promote e-governance in the country. In this regard, friends, let me tell you, we have chapter 3 under the IT Act. Chapter 3, section 4 to section 10A deals with the different issues pertaining to e-governance. When I say e-governance, the focus is on the delivery of government services using the information communication technology. Using information communication technology, when government delivers the services to the public, that comes under the purview of e-governance. In this regard also, there were certain fundamental requirements which were taken into consideration under the chapter 3, particularly the sections which we have under chapter 3, dealing with a range of different aspects of e-governance, using digital records, online delivery of services, all that is a part and parcel of the e-governance. So one thing what we have to keep in mind is that when the IT Act was framed way back in 2000, it had two objectives. First, to promote e-commerce in the country, and second one was to promote e-governance in the country. Now, we would be shifting our focus towards the next issue, that is, that what were the initial challenges the government faced or the law enforcement agencies faced. One by one we will see the initial challenges. Let's start with the initial challenge which is often discussed, which we often talk about, that is related to jurisdiction. There were lots of concerns regarding jurisdiction in cyberspace, that we often say that this technology is borderless, it has killed distance, it has made the whole world one, and in this scenario, in this new framework, jurisdiction was the biggest concern, because biggest initial concern. And why I am saying so, the reason is that for proper administration of justice, one thing which is very essential, that is that there should be proper jurisdiction. So this was a challenge, and we should be clear with the developments that took place in this regard. Judiciary was facing lots of issues related to jurisdiction, and In this regard, let me tell you that whatever was designed, whatever was framed by US was used by different countries including India. The tests, the frameworks, the theories which were developed in US were adopted by the different countries in this regard. Nothing is in isolation. We should be clear with this development. Why different countries adopted the theories, the tests evolved in the US? The reason was that it was US which came up with this technique. The internet was a brainchild of US. So it was US which confronted for the very first time cyber disputes. So it was US which for the very first time came up with certain theories like effect test, like target theory, minimum contact theory. So the theories which were used by US were adopted by the legal enforcement agencies in India to deal with the issue of jurisdiction. And let me tell you today, when it comes to jurisdiction, we have provisions under the IT Act that are enough to provide the jurisdiction requirements. So this initial challenge was addressed by adopting the tools, the theories, the tests which were initiated by US, which were initiated in US. The second initial issue which was faced by the law enforcement agencies was the limitation of digital signature. I told you that one of the primary objective behind framing of the IT Act was to promote e-commerce in the country, for which certain arrangements were made, and I told you that digital signature concept was initiated. So there was a concept of digital signature when IT Act was framed, when it was designed, and the initial challenge here was the limitation with the concept of digital signature. Though we started with digital signature, but at that point of time the concept of digital signature already had become obsolete. The digital signature concept was narrow in its approach, narrow in its scope, and the biggest concern related to the concept of digital signature was that whenever there was any change in technology, we had to amend the law. to provide a legal sanctity to the concept of digital signature. So this was the biggest lacuna associated with the concept of digital signature. Because we have always seen that technology changes overnight and law takes time for any kind of amendment. So it was not feasible for the government to amend the law every time the technology changed. So there was a requirement for something new, and in this regard the government came up with the concept of electronic signature, which was inserted in the Information Technology Act 2008. The good thing about the concept of electronic signature was that this was quite broad scope wise. In comparison to the concept of digital signature, the concept of electronic signature was quite wide. The concept of electronic signature had under its purview the digital signatures, the name which we write at the end of our mail, that also came under the concept of electronic signature, or biometric, etc. All that came under the concept of electronic signature. So this initial challenge was addressed with the introduction of the concept of electronic signature, which was the part of the IT Amendment Act 2008. Third initial issue was related to delivery of services, which is one of an essential part of e-governance. Many a times government agencies, they don't have expertise, they don't have funds, and in that scenario they have to rope in private players. So with regard to e-governance, there was no such section under the IT Act that provided legal sanctity to such partnership, and it was in this regard that section 6A was inserted in the IT Act, and this was done in the Amendment Act of 2008, which was executed 2009 onwards. Section 6A provided that the government agencies, they can rope in the private players to deliver the services, and so this opened up the scope of e-governance, and lots of private players, they were now made part of the whole activities which came under the purview of e-governance. Then the issue was there was one more important issue again, which is very important and which I think that is important to understand every aspect pertaining to cyberspace, and this issue was related to the liability of intermediaries, because when we talk about any internet activity, when we talk about anything happening online, we always we always have some kind of involvement of different entities which come under the category of intermediaries. So what would be the liability of intermediaries? This was one of the initial concern, and let me tell you that in this regard, the very first case was Bazi.com case. In this case, let me tell you that an engineering student was arrested for uploading video of a school girl which was quite objectionable. This student posted this video on the platform of Bazi.com. It was done on Saturday, and before it was taken down, the matter was reported to the Bazi.com, and before it was taken down on Monday around 11 a.m. Before it was taken down, 8 transactions already had taken place. No one came to know about this. After a few months, there were 2 arrests. That engineering student was arrested, and second arrest which was made in this regard was of the CEO of Bazi.com. Both were arrested. It led to lots of hue and cry. Lots of issues cropped up. And the biggest concern here was that at that point of time, government wanted to promote more and more startups in the digital world. And when the CEO of Bazi.com was arrested, this gentleman was from Silicon Valley. Lots of voice was raised against it from Silicon Valley, and the contention raised was that if people like the CEO of Bazi.com would be arrested, no one will dare to enter India. No one will dare to invest money in India. So there was a requirement for providing some kind of protection to the intermediaries, which are a very essential part of every online transaction that take place, or which are very important, which play a very important role in the internet functioning. Let me explain you the role of intermediary. You take any scenario, any online scenario. In every online scenario we have three entities. First we have the originator, who comes up with something, who comes up with a message. On the other extreme we have the addressee, who is intended to receive that message, who is intended to receive that service. And between these two extremes, in every online transaction we have some entities which function as intermediary. So intermediary makes this possible. In other words, it is intermediary which makes the functioning of internet possible. So here issue was, what would be the responsibility of, what would be the accountability of the intermediaries? And here till this Bazi.com case, there was nothing in our IT Act, nothing under IT Act that provided the clear picture in this regard. So, taking this into consideration, again the pressure was created, and now government had to come up with a framework that provided a level playing field to these intermediaries. So one more important thing which came up in the Amendment Act in the IT Amendment Act 2008 dealt with the intermediary guidelines. The definition of intermediary under section 2(1)(w) was broadened, and again the concept of due diligence came into picture, which talked about there will be some do's and don'ts for the intermediaries, and if they will abide by the do's and don'ts, then they would be exempted. This was the scenario which was developed. So this initial issue of the liability of intermediaries was addressed by coming up with a due diligence, for which the rules were framed in the year 2011. Next concern, the initial concern was that the focus was on e-governance, the focus was on e-commerce. Much provisions were not there under the IT Act to deal with the cyber crimes. Eventually, with the passage of time, people started using this technology for committing new kind of crimes which came under which were related to this technology. So one more important change which was made under the IT Act, under the IT Amendment Act 2008 was under the chapter offences, chapter 11 of the IT Act that deals with offences. I won't be wrong if I say that most of the changes which were made in the IT Amendment Act 2008 were related to cyber crimes. So practically speaking, 2009 onwards, when the IT Amendment Act 2008 was executed, there were three objectives of the IT Act. First was to promote e-commerce in the country, second was to promote e-governance in the country, and third was to deal with cyber crimes in the country. There were lots of issues like child pornography, like cyber terrorism. All these issues were addressed by making the necessary changes under the Chapter 11 dealing with offences. These were the initial challenges. Now we would be shifting our focus to the current challenges. If we talk about current challenges, though much has been done in this regard, though according to the requirement of time, amendments have been made to some extent, but still there are many issues which have to be addressed. The first current issue or the current challenge is related to e-governance. Though we have provisions under the IT Act dealing with e-governance, but still there are gaps in this regard, and it requires big push from the government. For example, the way setting up e-governance structure is important. Equally important is its maintenance. And for proper maintenance, for proper management, there is a requirement that overlapping has to be checked. And when it comes to the e-governance structure, the e-governance setup, what we see is that there is lots of overlapping. There are several agencies which are dealing with the same issue. So this overlapping has to be checked, and again, in order to make e-governance more smooth, more feasible, and overlapping has to be checked. Second issue is related to e-commerce. The current issue related to e-commerce is that especially in the recent years, e-commerce is growing like anything. Festival after festival, e-commerce is becoming big, and the thing is that there are issues related to the online safety which has to be dealt with. Apart from this, there are many other concerns like data protection, like cyber security, which still have to be taken very seriously. And why I'm saying so, the reason, the thing is that the IT Act which we have, the so-called cyber law which we have in our country, that doesn't directly deals with the data protection, that doesn't directly deals with the cyber security thing. So, and one more thing which we have to keep in mind is that initially when the IT Act was designed, it was framed, we had just 0.5% internet penetration. Now we are the internet penetration is more than 40%. It is very soon we would be reaching the 50% mark, and in this regard we have to come up with a regulation, with a law that can accommodate the recent developments like artificial intelligence, like the machine learning, the quantum computing. So this has to be taken into consideration. Only then things can happen. Then things can go in the right direction. So this was a short attempt to share with all of you some aspects related to cyberspace regulation. And with this, we come to an end of this lecture episode. And do keep in mind what we have discussed today. It's high time to be aware of the cyber realities that are coming up, and we have to be aware, and we have to share this awareness with our family and friends. That's it. Thank you.